We all know at this point that education needs to change, and in that aspect, Alden School District is ahead of the curve. The Surface Pros in the high school, the Makerspace in the intermediate, and the Character Cafe in the primary have all shown to be steps in the right direction. The middle school, however, is currently making a name for itself in that regard, and the subtle yet significant changes that have been happening over the years speak louder than any one aspect of the school ever could. Middle school principal Mr. Stephen Smith has worked in education for nearly 20 years, but made the transition from elementary level education to middle school principal about 5 years ago. Because of his experience and unique perspective, Mr. Smith was the best person to have elaborate on the what, the how, and the why of educational development at Alden Middle.
When I first started, everything was kind of teacher directed. Kids were sitting in rows, the teacher was in front of the class. There was very little group work, very little collaboration with the kids. And that was kind of something that I didn't see in the elementary world. There's not sitting in rows and desks. A lot of times kids are at their rug, they're in a circle. So coming from the elementary world to the secondary world, I was kind of taken back by that. A lot of the initiatives that the district kind of has put in place since I've been here kind of has started to push that collaborative classroom, student-based learning feel, and now we're starting to see that here in the middle school. Kids are sitting together, they're sitting at tables, they're sitting with a partner, teachers are walking around the room talking with the kids, and it's less of that teacher lecture, students sit and kind of do the work.
While the overall dynamic of education is changing, technology is also taking its strides towards what it means to be a modern classroom in Alden Middle. Optional clubs like robotics and coding are now full 4-credit courses, and the Surface Pros are beginning to make their mark in the classroom, specifically through the current piloting of the surfaces with the 6th graders, which is set to become a larger initiative in the near future. Because of this reasonably sudden transition, I decided to speak to a few teachers and get some perspective on how the surfaces are shifting the dynamic of their classrooms.
Well, right now the kids know more than me, so that is a learning curve for myself.
I know myself, I've been putting more for kids to check like answer keys online instead of always having to come to me, or hints so that they can look right away and get instant feedback if they're on the right track or not, instead of, coming up and asking questions. They can ask each other first, check online, and then if they're really stuck, come seek me out.
Kids are getting writing done a little bit easier. They don't have to go back and erase or start over again. They can just do the edits online, and they have access at home now through Office 365, so they can look up assignments if they forget them or if they lose them. It's saved in the cloud, so it's less likely that they'll forget to save it because it automatically saves.
Instead of asking one student a question in the class during a lesson, or asking the student with their hand raised, when I ask questions now, they all have to type their answers in, and they're all accountable for the learning that goes on in the classroom.
Allow the students to drive more of the instruction as to what they want to learn. So if we show them a phenomena, they can ask questions about that. We can do additional research and findings, and it really adds to what the core content is.
Really, I think it's increased productivity a great deal.
We're not where the high school is, but there is a lot of change here in the middle school since 5 years ago with the technology.
Middle school Spanish teacher Senora Santiago is probably one of the biggest advocates for student-centered cooperative learning, and she describes why it is an essential attribute of the classroom and student engagement.
Who can tell me is the enemy of cooperative learning? If a teacher stands in front of the room and says, "Who can tell me?" you'll get about maybe 1/3 of the class that raises their hand, and the rest of the students are disengaged. They're thinking about what they're having for lunch, or they're drawing. But the moment that you say, "Turn to your neighbor," half of the class is now engaged in the activity, and the more the merrier.
Mr. Smith goes on to stress the importance of student-centered learning, which is not only a more constructive and interactive way of learning, but also more engaging.
One of the biggest things is that switch to student-centered learning, having kids have conversations with each other, work on projects with each other, talk through each other, and having the teacher be more someone that's kind of there to support them and facilitate their conversations. We still have direct instructions because the kids still have to learn the material, but it's not just all stand and deliver anymore.
The transition that we see in the Alden Middle and across the entire district from old to new is more than a necessary change. But as expected, change does not come without its trials and tribulations. I asked Mr. Smith to elaborate on and address some of the concerns coming from parents and even students about the current shift in education and what that means for their futures.
Yeah, you're always going to have concerns whenever there's change. When we talk about student-centered and students working with each other and working on projects, obviously you're going to have less homework, there's going to be less assessments, there's going to be less things for the kids to do independently because a lot of it is project-based or working with a team of people. So parents are going to look at that and be like, well, what are they doing? I'm used to them bringing something home. They should have homework. They need to sit down and do these things at home or study for a spelling test and take a spelling test. Like, those are things that parents are comfortable with. And when you take that stuff away, parents are not comfortable because it's not the norm and they're not used to it. And kids aren't going to be used to it. There's kids that they just want to tell me what I need to learn, and then I'll study and I'll put it down and be fine and get through school like that. And it's a change for those kids. It's a change for the teachers to change how they teach and how they think about learning. And it's a change for the parents because they're not used to it, because that's not how they were taught. It needs to change because when they get out of school, when these students leave the high school in 5 years and then graduate college in 9 to 12 years, they're going to be going into a workforce that is going to look different than it does now. That's that whole push of teacher-centered to student-centered and having kids working with each other and problem-solving with each other and realizing how to get through those hiccups and be successful. Yes, change is tough for everybody. There's always change, and time will ease some of those changes, and it will be the norm and not the new anymore.